This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi.
Just when you thought the twist in the Bryan Kohberger case couldn't get any weirder or wilder, well, here we are, still waiting for that trial to come up and still wondering what are we going to find out before then. Apparently the answer to that is a lot. This week, we've got fingernail DNA evidence that may or may not matter, a surprise autism-based death penalty challenge, and a set of eerie text messages and a 911 call from the surviving roommates finally making their way into the public eye. And let's not forget, this whole thing is still a legal chess match with enough sealed court filings to make the CIA jealous. But here's the real kicker. The defense is now pursuing or pushing an argument that Kohberger's autism should spare him from the death penalty. The question is, does an argument like that actually hold legal weight, or is this just a strategic Hail Mary trying to humanize Bryan Kohberger before we actually get to trial? Joining us, retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, host of the podcast and YouTube channel Break the Case. Be sure to check that out wherever you get podcasts or on YouTube. Jen, let's start with this. The defense is arguing that Kohberger's autism makes him less culpable and thus ineligible for the death penalty. From your experience in the Bureau, does this hold up as a serious legal argument, or are we watching, really, again, the defense team trying to humanize Bryan as much as possible before this gets to court?
Well, I think they're certainly looking at every possible way to, as you say, try to humanize him. I mean, this was really caught most of us that have watched this case so closely off guard, and this is why. This is the first time we've ever heard of autism even mentioned.
Yeah.
After all these 2.5 years, there's been many other, filings, many other hearings. Oh, nothing has ever mentioned. And then all of a sudden this is mentioned. The other issue is there's so much precedent that this does not, you can't be autistic and that cover up a crime.
No.
In other words, explain a crime, excuse a crime. So from that standpoint, it's not going to work. Will it possibly mitigate the death penalty, the firing squad? Remember, that's what they're pushing for, is the firing squad, not just the lethal injection.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the interesting point, because that will be voted on. If he's found guilty. But I think it's very interesting that it seems like the defense thinks he's going to be found guilty. I mean, I know they're supposed to head some of this off at the past, but wow, the fact that they would bring up this autism apparent diagnosis all of a sudden is really interesting, Tony.
Because if they do bring this up, if it is allowed in, they could also bring this into the actual case too, right? It doesn't just have to be brought up in the sentencing part.
Well, this is the thing. In Idaho, there is absolutely no excuse for a mental incompetency or a mental issue allowed in their law. There's other states that have other laws on this, but Idaho is very firm on that. So really, it can only be used to mitigate. But your question is such a good one, because could it be woven into the questions and so forth asked by the defense? In other words, as judges sometimes put it, organically be entered in, right? Interviewing parents or sisters or other people about Bryan Kohberger. So, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting because the defense has said, listen, we don't want any words like psychopath. We want to make sure that those words never come up in opening statements and closing statements, things like that. But yet they want to bring up the word autism.
Yeah.
So I think the judge is going to have to rule on all of that, and it has to be across the board.
The thing is, and they'll take some education or educating of the jury if they're going to allow this in, is autism is not a psychopath. It's not a sociopath. They can be together. It doesn't have to be that one is just completely exclusive of the other. You can be a psychopath and be autistic. You can be a sociopath and
Yep.
be autistic. But being autistic doesn't mean you don't know right from wrong. It may mean that you interpret things a little different. It means you might laugh at things or hear things or feel things a little differently than others, but it doesn't mean right and wrong don't exist. I mean, that's still very much there. So, I mean, I could see this being used by the prosecution in many ways of going, okay, this is not saying he doesn't know right from wrong, but it is showing that he has these obsessive tendencies. He gets very stuck on a rut of what he believes is right. Or what he believes he wants to do. You talk about incels and such. I think you go to any sort of group of incels, you can probably find almost all of them are autistic and on the spectrum somewhere. That's why their brain works the way that it does. And the right and wrong thing, a lot of them don't act. They just, they commiserate in this weird, way of thinking. To me, I mean, I looked at Kohberger from day one and went, he's autistic, without a doubt. He's on the spectrum somewhere. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I would guess he's somewhere in the Asperger's realm of the world, where there's just that disconnect in very, very different ways and obsessive ways of thinking of things. And if this is the lane that he got into after years and years of rejection from women and developing this hate and just trying to find his place, it explains him. It explains him far more than I think many other things. Doesn't excuse any of it, but you go, oh, that's how he could get this obsessed with something and go down this line. And then I think you probably have a personality disorder at play as well, which would then allow the right and wrong to be out of the window.
Tony, on just talking with many different people regarding this and on social media, on X, talking about this particular thing, there are so many people in true crime that are autistic, right?
Yeah,
They have
completely.
autism, I should say.
Yeah.
And all of them vehemently say, this is, we're not murderers. We're not this.
Yes.
We're not, we're regular people
Yeah.
who are maybe socially, not as
Yes.
comfortable, really. And the other thing is, Tony, I take a look at the times he's interacted with police, because there we get to see him in action. And we have a lot of footage with him interfacing with police. The two interdiction stops in Indiana, and the stop with the female police officer for making a left turn on a red light. That was a long interaction. He doesn't come off as, from my experience, being socially shy, not looking you in the eye. I mean, he stares these people down. He's very strong. He's not at all intimidated. He doesn't seem like a fish out of water to me in terms of his social interactions at all. So I have to look at that. When I look at,
I'm going to disagree with you on that. As
Sure.
someone, I do disagree on that. As someone myself, I've never been diagnosed, but I fairly well believe I'm somewhere on the Asperger's spectrum, and I use it as a superpower, and that's why I always say, like, this can be a superpower too. It can make you insanely driven and able to focus on things in ways that neurotypicals can't, and you can be super successful. Some of the most successful people in the world have been.
Yeah.
But with that, when I watch him, I see it right away. He doesn't seem neurotypical. He does seem a little out of his. I mean, anybody I think would be out of their comfort zone when you're being pulled over by the police. But I don't know. I think I have a feeling that there is something going on there. Now, it does not explain right and wrong, that being gone. But I think, again, I feel like it does explain his odd behavior, the things he was noticing earlier in life, his obsessive behavior, his just very rigidness that he has. Because, again, it's a spectrum. People are all over on this. You can be super successful and use it for good. You can be highly functional. You can be very low functioning. He, I would say, probably highly functional, but, again, works in his own world, and there's not a lot breaking into that. So I don't buy that it should be a a reason not to execute him. Just autism alone is not a reason not to execute someone. If we get into other things, if we can see he's a psychopath, a sociopath, I'm all cool with that too. But then I think you have even more grounds to go, this person really is not right. Can they do new psychological testing? Can that be ordered? Can that be requested before the trial takes place to get a better grasp on mentally at least where he is today?
Oh, I'm sure they've had so much testing done. We've seen the documents that have been ordered sealed,
Hmm.
right? But yet the judge allowed us to see that they're ordering all this mental analysis sealed. In other words, we used to just see things that were sealed and have no idea what it is, right?
Sure.
Now we know it's his mental analysis and that of his family
Hmm.
too, which I found quite interesting. Um, are they trying to make some sort of genetic link in that way?
Yeah.
Um, but Tony, at the end of the day, they're going to look, I think, if he's found guilty, they are going to remember, and I believe the judge will let these photos in. They're going to see the crime scene photos.
Yeah.
They're going to see what this person did to these four young kids. And
Yeah.
I call them kids because they were, very young adults, certainly not financially free yet.
Hmm.
So young adults. And I think that that is going to override the word autism.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not going to be considered. It's going to be his actions that will be considered, not one of the many monikers of mental health issues that they try to put on him.
I'd agree, and I hope that that is how that is handled there. What's your take now that we've actually seen the text string, or at least a good chunk of the text string with the surviving roommates, and we've now seen the text of the 911 call that has been released. What's been your take on all that?
It's so important for showing the timeline. We That's a pretty solid, tight timeline now,
Yeah.
with all the messages that were done, and now we know exactly, when 911 was called. We know exactly when the text messages took place, when Dylan Mortensen tried to reach out to Kaylee and Maddie and Xana, and tried to get them to respond. We know when she reached out to her father now. So we have this beautiful timeline that cannot be argued.
Hmm.
So I think that's really important. The jury needs to see that. Secondarily, it proves what was said in the PCA all along,
Yeah.
that Dylan Mortensen wasn't so trashed from drinking that she couldn't identify details. She said, this is the mask, covered his mouth, it covered his whole head like a ski mask.
Hmm.
And even when um, Bethany tries to say, well, remember, Xana wore black tonight, she said, no, 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 this is different. I'm so scared. I'm so freaked out. So it really is in line with everything we've heard, that
Hmm.
she was scared, she was frightened. What people are angry about is her actions she took, that
Yeah.
she didn't call 911, that she didn't, go and check on them. But who could ever imagine that your four roommates were massacred? You could imagine a guy
Yeah.
came in to steal some stuff,
Yeah.
but I think she was just scared and said, I'm just going to hunker down here and talk with Bethany until my phone dies. And then when it gets light out and I feel, I'm going to go down and see her.
I think people need to take a step back on that one and go and stop saying, well, this is what I would do. Well, that's great. That's what you would do. Are you a 19-year-old in the year 2022? And in this sort of situation, and what the way that your social structure has been brought up is probably not the same of a 40-year-old. No, it's very, very different. And it, not maybe the most effective way of thinking, or the best choice that she made not to call 911, but they communicate amongst themselves before they call the police, which is not that uncommon. Plus, if you're not truly thinking that your roommates are murdered at that moment in time, which I don't think they thought, well, maybe they're just drunk and passed out, and there's a weird guy that came in the house. We just saw him leave. Okay, it's done. Let's go back to bed. They're not thinking that the people are dead. Plus, you're a party house. The last thing you want is the police wandering through your party house, finding whatever somebody may have in their own room that may be illegal, or somewhere in the house, or anything of that nature. You're not openly inviting police in for any real reason. And not knowing that there's a murder scene yet, yeah, I get it why you wouldn't be calling the police when you're in that mindset. Back in our days, if we were in that situation, the only option we had was 911. We didn't have text to friends. We didn't have a cell phone to call our buddies and go, hey, I'm really scared right now, and kind of get that fear mitigated and calm down. These guys did. So it kind of makes sense to me. Their line of thinking, again, not the best choice, but it makes sense.
It does make sense. And the other thing is, we know that they had no inkling anything bad had happened, because even when they're seeing Xana lying on the ground, unconscious, not, they're still saying, oh, she went out last night, she got drunk.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all throughout the 911. They're not saying she's bleeding out. And I tried to explain that, yes, the blood down the wall, that's all very real. The bloodbath that's in Maddie and Maddie's room with her and Kaylee, all that's real, because if you slice somebody's throat and break open an artery, yes, it's a complete bloodbath, stabbing them in the chest, all of that. But we don't know exactly where Xana was cut. And when you take a knife that's that thin blade like that, and you go in and out and pierce the body, it closes, the skin closes. So if he didn't go for the neck or the artery and just stabbed her at various places, I've treated these and I've seen them. And it's amazing. People can even walk around with multiple stab wounds because they kind of seal up, and it's not until the internal bleeding starts that's inside the body that they can die. And I think that that's what we're going to hear about with Xana.
Yeah, I mean, there's 4 different people here. It's not all of them were killed exactly the same way. You can stab somebody and it looks like they're passed out sleeping because it didn't turn into a bloodbath. On some of the others, it certainly did. But maybe not on Xana. That's how it presented at that time of that phone call. Where do you think, or what else do you think we're going to hear coming out here now that Hitler's very much pushing for transparency? We have the 911 call. We have these text messages. There's a lot I'm curious about, including like the cell phone data of Kohberger. What was he looking up? What was he texting? Those sort of things. What was on his Amazon shopping list? What do you think we're going to find? What do you think is going to come out here before the trial now?
Well, I think there could be more information related to his digital searches. We already know the Amazon, the defense is trying to get that out right away. They don't want to see searches, and they don't want to see what he purchased,
Which
right?
are
Because
key items.
it's going to go back to that K-bar knife.
Yeah.
That's what I believe.
Yeah.
But separate from that, I want to know all the digital information related to things like Google searches.
Yeah.
Did he, how to best kill somebody, the quickest way, things regarding his sexual anger. Was he Googling about incels? Was he, what all was he do? That's what I want to see. And I think the defense, especially if there's some that creep into that mind, the mind of Kohberger, that gives us a glimpse. I think we're going to see more on that, that the defense is going to motion to keep out.
They'll certainly file their motions to keep it out, but I'm guessing there's some pretty damning things in there. I think if we see a K-bar knife on an Amazon list, I think it's game over. And especially if we see anything involving searching for murders or being involved in any sort of incel group or just expressing the frustration with women and some of the things that we've seen, not exactly that, but just very, interesting ways of thought patterns with him in the past. That's going to be very, very damning. So I get that's why they don't want it in there. Is that also why we are seeing such a strong argument this early in? I mean, granted, we're almost 3 years in, but this close to the trial for arguing his life or death with the autism argument. Not to focus on the autism argument, but to go, is this why we're putting this in here now and we're making a big focus on it? Because we're almost kind of assuming, look, all this other shit's going to come out and it's game over at that point.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head there, Tony. And the other thing is, and I know I've argued this isn't going to happen this year. We're looking at next year at the earliest. Um, Man, I'm quasi retracting, only not the whole way because my experience is speaking against me. But what I didn't factor in is Judge Hippler.
Yeah.
Judge Hippler is running a tight ship, even tighter than I expected.
Yeah.
He's got tight, rigid time frames. He only allows arguments for a short amount of time. He is not allowing the circus of, expert after expert to make a point. Uh, he's really tactically, and when Ann Taylor just says nonsense, he just shuts her up.
Mm-hmm.
He interrupts her, and he says, "Yeah, but isn't probable cause DNA on the knife sheath below the dead murdered victim twice on Sundays?" And he's made many other comments that have been able to kind of thwart Ann Taylor from talking ad nauseum about the same thing over and over. So I think things are really proceeding on track. And I think Ann Taylor's worried she's not going to be able to derail the August date.
I think she is too. I think, her reactions when Hippler shuts her down have been kind of priceless. She's doing her job. She's a great attorney. I'm not knocking her. I'm just like, you can just kind of see it on her. If you're reading the tea leaves, you can kind of see it on her face like, oh, well, that one's not going to work. It's like, I tried.
Let's move on.
Let's go for another one. I'm going to argue. It's like arguing in class at like a court classroom where you're studying law. It's like, damn it, I really gave that a college try and it didn't work out. I kind of get that feeling from Ann Taylor, but my God, with all this and all that's going to continue to come out, I think it's going to be a lot of trying to control the narrative as best that she can on a ship that is very much taking on too much water in the watertight compartments and is going down. But we'll see. It's still many months away.
Many months, Tony.
The latest true crime stories, expert breakdowns, and shocking twists, all in one place. Press subscribe now to the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today.